Depression. That's how I'm going to start today. Talk about depression. I started to say recently that I would not be touched by depression again. That I couldn't see myself ever falling into depression. However, depression is not just an illness, it's not just a sadness, but it's also the way you conduct yourself when depressed is like a way of being, it's a state of being. And in yoga, it's called tama. The tamaguna is lazy and depressed. And depression kind of works like a cycle whereby lazy behaviors lead to poor choices, which lead to negative feelings, the wrong chemicals being released. For me, I've found that I can fall into this cycle, and it's a case of waking up, not wanting to get out of bed, feeling lazy. But where did that come from? Well, for me, it came from the night before. The night before, I ate late, I had a heavy meal, lots of bread, lots of carbohydrates, and that led me to wake up feeling heavy, feeling very tamaguna, very lazy, don't want to get out of bed, don't want to do anything. And then it's a cycle, because when I wake up like that, the first thing that I think about is food. I'm craving already more of this food that makes me feel more of this way. And it becomes a cycle. So anyway, I found myself last week or the week before, it's been a couple of weeks now since I actually did a podcast, did a recording. It's been Christmas, it's been New Year's, I've had a little break, I'm in a brand new place now. I'm bloody blown away by where I am right now, but I'm in Rishikesh at a retreat centre, and it's called Sattva Retreat Centre actually, if you were interested and you wanted to look it up, because I'm not going to be here by the time you look it up. However, you can have a look and it's absolutely amazing. I would recommend it to anybody. I'm right next to the River Ganges. I can literally see the River Ganges right now or Ganga. I'm not really sure what the pronunciation is. I think there's two different spellings. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, I can see it from where I am right now. I woke up this morning at 5:30 roughly. Got up, went for a swim in the pool, a cold swim. It's absolutely freezing in there. Then went for puja, which is kind of worship, I think that's what it means. That's what we do anyway. And then I went for a meditation down by the Ganga. My meditation has just been absolutely amazing recently. Since being here, really, it's been the big change that I've needed. I've been working hard, doing my yoga training, and now I've come to a retreat and realised, like, even though I've been practicing yoga every day and doing a lot of physical practice, like, I still needed a retreat to jump out of that, to have some self-reflection. So last time we spoke, I was doing a fast. I fasted for 4 days from the winter solstice to Christmas Day, and it was amazing. It was the best fast I've ever done. I started off eating just fruit for 1 day. I then just drank salt water for 4 days, and I just felt so clean. It was unbelievable. On Christmas Day, I broke the fast very slowly. Started with some fruit, some watery fruit, some papaya. Then gradually added some cucumber, tomatoes, and some hummus. Started to get some protein in there. And as the day went on, I slowly increased the food intake before I had a big meal in the evening, big protein, heavy meal, and things were great. Then the following day, I started off fantastic with my diet, and it was just my usual stuff. I'm not going to go into that, it's pretty boring, but it's, you know, high protein. It was vegan based as well. I normally make vegan stuff when I cook for myself. A lot of the time I don't buy milk or eggs, and I certainly don't buy or eat meat anymore. So anyway, that day I ended up getting a tattoo in the evening, and I sort of half planned it but half didn't. And the tattoo, it was a bit of a long process with, you know, sometimes they've got to print out the things, the stencils, and then they stick it on, and all of this, that and the other, whatever. It took a long time. We ended up being there till 1 a.m. and it got to about 11, and I was trying to intermittently fast in the evening. And what happens is usually by about 9 p.m. I'll get hungry. But I know that about 9, 10 o'clock I go to sleep and I wake up and I eat. I like to eat early, fast late. So what happened was I was in the studio and the artist said, oh, I'm going to get some food. And it was 11 p.m. by this point. Obviously I was really hungry at that time, especially after being in such a calorie deficit, after coming off this fast. So I thought, right, well, if I'm going to eat, I'll just have something healthy. I'll just have like tofu and vegetables, just a little tofu stir fry. Oh, sorry, they don't do that, apparently. So, brilliant. What am I going to get then? And he was like, oh, I'm just going to get you a paneer. He basically ordered for me, and I was a little bit stressed, but I kind of had to go with it. And then it came, and it was like this chili paneer. So it's just a super saucy paneer, and I don't know, it just was not ideal, especially not at that time of night. So I woke up and I had a really bad stomach, really horrible, just poop in my pants. And what I then started to find, so I didn't let that affect me too much, got back onto my normal diet, sort of tried to flush it out with some fruit. And yeah, then I started to realise that every time I was eating out, so I, like I say, cook for myself normally, I then ate out maybe 2 or 3 days after this with my friend. We went for a thali at this place, and I got a thali, and the difference between mine and her plate was that I got some curd on my plate, and I thought, yeah, I'll eat the curd, whatever, a bit of dairy, doesn't hurt anybody, you know. So I ate this thali, and that evening and the following morning, again, really bad stomach. So I'm like, right, something's up here. And I started to realise that I might have possibly developed an intolerance for lactose, a lactose intolerance during the fast. And so I come off the fast, I'm eating clean, and then suddenly I'm putting dairy into my body, and boom, my stomach's not enjoying it. So I started to realise that. However, I'd been putting these foods in, and slowly there was becoming this kind of laziness, and it came to New Year's Day, and me and my friend ended up having a big day of eating. We did the same the night before, actually. New Year's Eve, we had a big meal in the evening. Neither of us drink, so we didn't go out and party or anything. We just had a big meal. And I was just there, like, eating the bread, cheesy garlic naan, like, not really worrying about anything. Just like, oh, do you know what? Today, I'm just relaxing. So then the following day, felt a little bit like groggy. New Year's Day, went out for some more food. We went for an Italian, actually, and got like pizza, garlic bread, and loads of dairy. And so I was at a point where my body was saying, you don't need dairy, stop putting dairy in me, you keep making me shit my pants, so just stop it. And my mind was saying, but I really like the taste, I love cheese, it's great, so I'm just going to keep eating it. So I had a little bit of conflict there at the beginning of the year. But I didn't let it get to me. I sort of was like, I'm just going to ride this out, and eventually it'll play itself out. I'm just going to set the intentions to sort this out without forcing myself to do anything radical overnight. So at the beginning of the year, I ended up getting a little bit depressed or experiencing depressive symptoms. I wasn't really depressed, I wasn't really down. However, like I spent a couple of days in bed, just completely in bed for 2 days straight. Didn't really get up. I would get up and walk downstairs and get some water and things, but I put it down to the food that I was eating massively. But I feel like when you say to the universe, or you put it into words, you say it out loud, something, for example, mine was, I don't think depression can touch me anymore. I'd said that to a number of people, said it out loud to the universe. And so the universe decides to throw challenges my way. Well, how about this? What about if you do this? What about that? You know, and I was like, oh shit, maybe depression does still exist, even on somebody like me who likes to fly in a manic state of consciousness all the time. Saying to my cousin the other day, I love just like inducing mania and just sitting in these elevated states without getting lost in them. But that's another thing, isn't it? So yeah, I got pretty depressed, and anyway, I ended up leaving my place of practice where I was practicing at the yoga studio with my teacher, and I've ended up in Rishikesh. That was kind of planned. It wasn't like just because I was depressed I got up and packed and left. But yeah, the depression just sort of sorted itself out. I just, like I say, I set the intentions and I kind of accepted it. I was like, this is the karma of my life right now. This is the action that is manifesting. So I must just let it work itself out and sit, reflect, and get on with shit, you know? Get up, do stuff, start moving a little bit more, you know? Increase my step count, get back in the gym, practice yoga, meditate. All of these things, you have to slowly, one by one. And then yeah, I've come to this meditation retreat, and honestly, it's the best thing ever that I've needed. And it's really shown me where the past couple of months my practice has been heavily physical. It's very much been Ashtanga practice, do the physical, the primary series, get it done, and really forgetting about all of the other aspects that I know for me matter for my mental health, and yeah, it's all of these spiritual practices. So such as the puja, the devotion, you know, not blind devotion, not like believing in some kind of God that doesn't may or may not exist, but devoting myself to the divine consciousness, which for me is something that I've experienced. It's not like I'm putting blind faith in, oh, there might be a God that's kind of orchestrating things. But for me, like divine consciousness and something larger than myself, it's a no-brainer really. And by this I mean like intelligence beyond human comprehension, like plants, trees. There's an intelligence inside that is so unconscious, that is what I understand as divine intelligence, divine consciousness. Okay, and the thing that connects all of that, basically nature. You look at nature and you're like, that's God. That is literally God. But not God like it's portrayed when you're in school as like some man sat behind the clouds puppeteering things, but just the divine intelligence within everything in nature. And then just look inside your body as well. Look at how intelligent, there's a super intelligence in your body that's unconscious, that you have not got access to with your mind, your tiny little mind that can only see a fraction of what goes on within you on the inside, right? So start looking inside and you think, right, my heart beats, okay, my lungs filter air, they literally turn air from oxygen into carbon dioxide and they chuck it back out. Like that's a machine. There's mechanics to that. There's a bloody art to it. That doesn't just, it's just, people are like, well, that just is, that's just how it is. And then the science tells us why it does that and how it does that. But that's intelligent, that's smart, that's pre-programmed to do that. That's divine. That's God. Same with all your other organs. Everything that happens, you put food in your mouth, it goes through you and you chuck it out as shit, right? That's crazy, that's a process. Science tells us how it happens, but there's an intelligence behind it. There's a divine intelligence. And knowing that everything's connected, we know this from science also, that's God, that's divine. That's something that's greater than our consciousness. So where was I going with that? Well, basically, what I had been forgetting to do, and this is part of the Yoga Sutras, is, I think it's called Ishvara Dhyana, but I might have got that wrong. I'm not even going to check myself because I can't be bothered to get up and just check this for the sake of this. So yeah, anyway, what that means is, if I've got the word right, which I might not have got the word right, but I'll explain what it means anyway, and then you can do some research yourself. But it means remembering the divine, the divinity in everything. And puja, worship, daily worship, is doing that. It's connection to the divine, which is essentially connection to yourself, because there's no difference. There's no difference between the divine and you. So, yeah, that's part of my practice. My practice is also meditating more and ensuring that I get up early and do all of these practices. And so I'm not letting the element of sleep. Sleep can be a tool to regenerate, but it also can be something that holds you back and really prohibits you from doing a lot of things. So I've started making sure I'm getting up a little bit earlier, doing all my practices, and then whatever my karma is that day, carrying that out. Which today it's recording a podcast, because this is something that I've been putting off for a while. I wanted to record it, especially in that week when I was feeling depressed, and I just couldn't bring myself to open it up and start recording and everything else. So it's taken me a couple of weeks, but here we are, and we continue the story. So I mean that lines up quite well actually with where we were in the story in terms of my dad dying. So my dad died at the end of January in 2015. Sorry, 2016, my bad. And then I became very, well, not depressed immediately, but I stopped going to school and I just started smoking weed every day. I took quite a while off school, quite some time. And there was this big period in between my dad dying and his funeral. So he died at the end of March and his funeral wasn't until I'll slow down. He died at the end of January and his funeral wasn't until the 1st of March, the beginning of March. So I had a whole month where I was just in this space where I wasn't really sure what was going on. Now, lots of things happened in that month. Like I say, I stopped going to school. School was the least of my priorities. I was studying my A-levels. Basically, my A-levels at that point were determining whether or not I went to university. And at that point, I had a place for university at the University of Glasgow to study psychology, and I needed to get 3 A's. So I stopped going to school. So with the death of my dad came the birth of my uncle. My dad grew up in America and he had one brother, one younger brother. I'd never met this guy really, apart from maybe when I was like 3 months old or something. My mum went over to America. Well, that's another thing. I spoke to my mum the other day and she said, well, I said to her, Mum, listen, I'm doing this podcast thing. I've started doing a podcast talking about my life. I'm like, you're involved, right? Obviously, my stepdad's involved. And I'm telling you lots of stories. And, as much as it's an anonymous podcast, some people might listen to it and know who you are. You don't mind, do you? And my stepdad's not going to mind, is he? That I'm telling these stories, especially, in the younger days when he was very abusive. And I also said to her, yeah, our cousins listened to it, and he said that's he said he finds it hilarious that he's listening about his auntie smuggling drugs into an American prison. And she just turned around and said, well, it wasn't an American prison. It was up in Scotland that happened. And I said, oh, right, sorry. So she said, well, you better tell him, because that's wrong. You've got that wrong. You better go on your podcast and tell him that it was a Scottish prison that I was smuggling drugs into. I said, all right, sorry, Mum. All right, I'll let him know. And she said, over in America, I was putting acid tabs behind a stamp to send to your uncle. So I said, oh, right, okay, that might have been where I've got confused. So that was to my uncle that lives in America. My mum was putting acid tabs behind a stamp. I don't know if she's posting them from the UK or what she was up to, but that's quite funny, isn't it? So my uncle, I'd never really met him. I'd spoken to him on FaceTime once when I was at my dad's. We were getting drunk, we were having a smoke and everything, and I didn't know the guy. And when my dad died and his funeral was coming up, we're in contact with our sisters in America, and yeah, my sister just said, "Oh, your uncle's coming over," and basically he's going to come to the funeral. I was like, "All right, I'll pick him up." I had a car. My sister lives over here. She didn't have a car. She didn't drive. It was just me. So I'm 17 years old, and I'm like, right, I've got to go and pick my uncle up from the airport. And so it was a couple of days before my dad's funeral that he arrived in the UK, and I went to the airport as a 17-year-old to pick up a man that I didn't know who he was, really, an absolute stranger that I call my uncle. So I pick him up, and he's this guy, and he's like, everybody described him as my dad on steroids, because he was just this big, energetic. My dad was quite laid back, big weed smoker, just relaxed, really soft energy. I describe my dad as. It was very soft energy. Whereas my uncle, opposite end of the spectrum, ADHD like anything, full of energy all the time, and always wants to be centre of the attention. So I've got this big American guy, bit of an actor, bit of a performer. He was a performer. He was in a band called Spilt Milk when he was back when he lived in Florida years ago. So he was a bit of a rock star kind of American, just massive energy. This big old ball of energy, just like, yeah, you want to go? Let's go. So I pick him up, and we had to drive from London to Bournemouth from the airport to my dad's funeral. I think we drove straight to my dad's funeral, pretty sure. Yeah, we must have done. And so then we got to know each other a little bit in the car, and I just thought he was great. I thought this was amazing. It was like I had my dad in his youth. I finally had a male that I thought was pretty cool, and maybe even a role model. I don't know. At that time I was just thinking, wow, this is just amazing. From the death of my dad has come the birth of my uncle, and it's like having my dad 30 years ago when he maybe had more energy, was maybe himself, because in his last few years you could tell he was dying, but also he was always like, oh, I'm fine. It turned out he had lung cancer and everything when the autopsy came back, on top of everything else. He'd suffered from pneumonia a few times, and I think that was due to the heroin use. So we get to the funeral and meet up with my sister, meet up with all of my dad's friends. My uncle does a speech. It was absolutely great. Obviously nobody really knew him. I think a couple of them had met him, a couple of my dad's friends, years prior. And yeah, so we had the ceremony at the crematorium, and then we went to leave the crematorium, and as we're leaving, my car gets a flat tyre. and my uncle ends up fixing it. I've got a brilliant video of him just underneath the car, and he's and I'm videoing him. He's changing the tire, and he goes, "Really? Are you fucking kidding me? I just buried my brother." Changing the flat tire.
Really? So I just fucking buried my brother? Are you fucking kidding me?
In the crematorium. So we went to the after party, and this is where, you know, my family, my dad's side of the family, just seemed to be very similar in this respect. So within the 5 minutes of being in this pub, and it was the pub, my dad's local pub that we went to for the wake. I don't know why they call it a wake. Bloody man's dead. Far from awake. Maybe he's had an awakening. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's an awakening and he's gone to a new spiritual dimension. I don't know. So he's there in the pub. This is the pub that my dad used to play pool at as well. Within 5 minutes, he's found a drug dealer, right? And he's gone and bought some ecstasy pills. He's bought 3 ecstasy pills. I can't remember if my sister was doing ecstasy at that time. But anyway, we ended up taking a load of ecstasy at my dad's funeral. Me and my uncle. I think my sister did. Can't remember. And we went back to my dad's friend's house, and I was just fucked. I was so fucked on ecstasy, and smoking a shit ton of weed as well. So we really partied for his funeral, and then my uncle was around for 2 weeks after that, and so we decided to plan a trip to Scotland. To spread my dad's ashes. So my dad was born in Scotland, as was I. And my grandparents, my dad's parents, very Scottish. And they were buried or cremated up in Scotland. We're not sure. So we decided to plan this road trip to Scotland so that we could spread my dad's ashes up in Scotland, and we could visit places where our family was from. Now, I was a 17-year-old who was working a couple of jobs. I think at that time I started doing events work. I was waiting, doing bits like that, working at wedding events, as well as I'd stopped the paper round by then, that's for sure, and I'd stopped the toll bridge. I think I was just working as that, actually, and then making a little bit of money from weed every now and again. But it wasn't anything massive. I wasn't really selling it anymore, he says. So we head up to Scotland, and prior to this, I'd taken my uncle to my village, introduced him to my family. My mum obviously knew him from years ago, but she didn't really want him staying with us because there was a conflict of interest there with my stepdad, and so he didn't stay with us. We got him a little Airbnb or a B&B in the village, and he would walk around the village and get to know people. He just talks to everyone. He's one of those people. So he soon sort of found his place in the village within a day or two, made friends with everybody, and he was just becoming a character. People started to know him. That's your uncle, isn't it? The Bipolar Yogi's uncle is in the village. That's what they used to say. So, we planned this trip up to Scotland, right? And I didn't have much money at the time. I was shit with my money, really, really shit. I'd spend it all on drugs all the time. I had a car, money went on that as well. I was paying for insurance, fuel, whatever. And my uncle comes along, and he's not got money as well. He's come from America, and he's not got much money. So I'm like, right, looks like I'm paying for the fuel then, am I? And we had to go to get a new tyre as well, because my tyres were absolutely bowled on my car. And that costs like 50 quid at a time. I think I had a money box, right, with loads of pound coins and small change in it, and I ended up taking that. We went to the tyre place on the way to Scotland, and I gave them like money bags. It was like 50 quid in pound coins to pay for this tyre. It's just ridiculous looking back. I'm like, what on earth? And I didn't see that as a red flag, you know. Oh, is my uncle? Why is my uncle not getting any money? I didn't really question that. So we headed up to Scotland. We went on this journey, and I was paying for everything, which I thought was weird, but I also just didn't question it. I was like, this is great. I got my dad on steroids. I've got a new dad. So when things like that happen, you blindside everything else. You sugarcoat it. You're like, oh, this man's amazing. You know, he's great. He's my blood. He's my bones. So we went up to Scotland, and our first stop was a small town called Kirkintilloch, and that's where my parents used to live. That's where I was born. We also, so we started off looking for my grandparents' grave. Now, we didn't know where they were buried, and I don't know, my uncle didn't go to the funeral. So we were just looking for graveyards around Kirkintilloch. It was like a wild goose chase. And we were messaging family members saying, do you know where were they buried? Where were they buried? And it was really funny. We were driving along, and we pulled into this graveyard. It was the first one that we pulled into, and we started looking around. We started looking at the graves. We were like looking at the graves, walking up and down. Imagine, right? Two guys walking up and down a graveyard, searching for my grandparents, his parents. Couldn't find it anywhere. Then we went to another graveyard. We got told, oh, it might be in this one. They might have been buried there. Walking up and down, can't find it. Went to another one. Before we finally find out that they weren't buried, they were actually cremated. They're like, oh, brilliant. So we found out they were cremated, and we were given the address of the graveyard or the church that the service was at. So we went there, and lo and behold, it turned out that this church was the first one that we had entered. So the one that we went into to begin with and looked around all the tombstones, the first one we checked was the one that they were actually in, or they had had their service at. And we went in there and we spoke to the people, and they said, yeah, if people are cremated around this time, we have a garden of remembrance. So that's where the ashes will go. So we said, all right, can we spread our dad's ashes, or my dad's ashes, his brother, in this place? And they said, no, you can't. They said it's not allowed. You're not allowed to spread ashes there anymore. But we were like, oh, all right, well, can we go and have a look? And they're like, yeah, of course. So we're in there, and my uncle pulls out my dad's ashes, and we start spreading them around. He starts reading some of there's little cards just stuck in the ground, like, oh, Jeanette, 92, loving mother. Then, right, this is sick. If you don't like dark humour, then you need to fast forward, or you need to get off of this podcast. So he looks at one, and it says, like, it says Abigail, 16, a loving daughter. He says, your dad will love that. And sprinkles it. It's horrible, but it's funny, right? It's funny. What does it matter? We're all going to die one day, aren't we? It's just a sick joke. It's just a funny, sick joke. Anyway, moving on swiftly. So we left this funeral, and we head out into Glasgow, and we're just going to go and do some exploring around Glasgow, right? And like I said, we had no money. Now, one of my friends in the village, he's a bit of a funny character, and he's always collecting stuff, stamps, coins, all sorts. And my uncle had met him, and he'd said to my uncle, oh, you can have these coins, these are worth bloody loads, they are. So me and my uncle, we're in Glasgow, we've got fuck all money. And he's like, let's go to a pawn shop and try and get some money for this stuff that your mate's just given me. So I was like, all right. So we go along. And at this time, okay, so my dad was classified as disabled. So he had a disabled badge. So when we were going through his belongings, I thought, well, we can have that, can't we? We'll put that in my car. So I had a disabled badge, right? And we're in Glasgow. And we're in the city, and I decided to park on double yellows. We were like, well, we can just park anywhere, can't we? Because we've got a disabled badge. So we parked on double yellows and went into this place. We walk into this place and we're trying to pawn these things. I think we've got like a toy car or a toy train, model train, which he's told us is really rare, and some coins. And we go into this place. Basically, the guy's like, it's not worth anything, mate. Like, it's just kids' toys. So my uncle's pissed off. and then we go out and we're walking up to the car and there's a bloody man there about to give us a ticket. The ticket man. And we're like, oh shit. So we walk over and we're like, what's going on? You know, thinking we've got disabled. And he's like, oh, you can't park here even if you're disabled, because even at double yellows, they've got this like extra yellow mark on the curb, which means that even disabled people can't park there. And we're like, oh bollocks, we obviously don't know the rules about disabled parking because we're not disabled. So then he takes a look at us and he's like, and whose badge is this? So then my uncle, he's like, puts on his acting and he's like, oh, it's my brother's, he's died. You know, it's a terrible thing and we're really sorry, blah blah blah. And the guy says, well, I've already written a ticket, so I've given the ticket and I'm gonna have to take the badge off you. So he takes the badge off us and we're like, right, okay, sorry about that. Get in the car and go. And so we've got no money, we haven't pawned anything, and now we've just been fucking fined. So we've also got nowhere to stay. So we went back to Kirkintilloch, and there's a McDonald's there. It's getting late by this point, and we stayed at a 24-hour McDonald's. Stayed overnight in the car. What we did have though was a little bit of alcohol. So we were drinking, getting a little buzz on. Anyway, I fell asleep in my car just there overnight, and I think by about 10 o'clock they actually closed the McDonald's for maintenance work. He said, yeah, we're closed now for maintenance. So we were in the car, and I'm putting the engine on to keep us warm, and I fall asleep. Anyway, I wake up, engine's off, Uncle's gone, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm freezing cold, it's like 3 a.m. And then I look over and he stood over having a cigarette with the guys that are working at McDonald's. And like I say, they were closed for maintenance overnight, so they weren't opening until 6 a.m. So my uncle starts chatting to them, then he comes and gets me. He says, oh, we're going to go in here and have a drink with these guys. So we go in and they start making us a coffee and everything, and it's all free. They're like, yeah, don't worry. And we're there putting Scotch whiskey inside our coffee, having a nice whiskey coffee. What's that? A Irish coffee, right? We're having our Irish coffee there, sat in McDonald's. And then I've got another video. I should get these videos up and play them to you. Maybe I'll do that some other time. Maybe I'll put them on the Instagram, because that'll be funny. So my uncle's like, oh, can I go behind the counter and we'll get a video of me working? He says, welcome to McDonald's, Kirkintilloch. How can I help you? And the Scottish guy goes, I'll have an egg muffin, please. That was probably a terrible Scottish accent. So yeah, all of this craziness. Basically, it was a crazy journey. That was how I met my uncle. And so we continued our journey around Scotland. We visited my dad's birthplace, which was Lennox Castle, and we were following a map to Lennox Castle, and it actually took us to Celtic Football Club's training ground. So we ended up walking up to Celtic Football Club. We had no idea. It wasn't very well signposted either. And heading up there, guy comes along, says, "Oh, you can't be round here." My uncle again, "Oh, my brother's died, blah blah blah. Can we have a photo?" So we've got some photos of us at Celtic football ground. So it's great, good fun. And then we had to head home. So we headed back home, and we went back to my village. And my stepdad's a singer, right? And like I say, my mum wasn't interested in having my uncle stay at our house. But I just sort of said to her, you know what, look, my dad's died, he's got nowhere else to stay. He was going to stay at my friend's house, but we got back from Scotland at like 3 a.m. and we couldn't get into my friend's house. So I just went to my mum and said, "He's staying here, nothing you can do about it. My stepdad's just going to have to get on with it." And then they did. Obviously, my uncle, being this like charming American guy, gets on with everyone. He knows how to speak to people. He's a people's person. And my stepdad's also a singer. He's in a band, and he's got a gig coming up. So they start chatting. And my uncle loves to sing, loves to perform. So then he ended up having a little bit of a leaving do, and he went and sang at a pub just outside of our village, which was lovely. Like, this was great. My family's bonding. You know, my dad's side with my stepdad and everything. Like, things are great. Everything's sort of coming together. This is cool. I'm starting to find in my roots. I've been up to Scotland where I was born. Everything was really cool. And then my uncle had to go, so he left, dropped him off at the airport, and then we started to stay in contact, and it was really nice. He would call me up all the time. So yeah, it was fantastic. From the death of my dad, really started this new relationship, which was much more, I felt, than what I had with my dad. So that was fantastic. So I'll leave it there for today, because it's getting on, and I've got to go and practice yoga now. But I hope it's been a good podcast today. I hope you've enjoyed yourself if you've got this far. I don't know, some people might listen and just listen to a bit, or might not be what they expect or whatever, but I'm really enjoying doing this. I'm really enjoying the feedback that's coming. It's been great. Released 4 episodes now, and people have started to watch. It's fantastic. I'm really, really grateful. So thank you to everybody who's watching. Would love to hear more comments, more feedback, and I'll see you next week as we delve into a big twist, a big turn in my life. Things started to really, really change after I met my uncle. So I'll see you next week. Peace.